We'll start here by launching the Comm App application using the desktop shortcut that was saved on the desktop during the installation of the application. When the home screen of the Comm App shows, as shown here, the options will be at the very top. The one that we're interested in is the Radio MDTS option. So click on that button to view those options. Next, you'll select the radio type that you're trying to connect to, and for this tutorial video, it's going to be the CM300 350v2 transmitter. Before we launch the Radio MDTS application for the version 2 radios, I want to emphasize a couple things. The first one being, do not launch multiple instances of the Radio MDTS application. Then prior to launching the Radio MDTS application for the version 2 radios, make sure that nothing is connected to the Ethernet port on your computer, sometimes referenced as also the network port. Make sure that nothing's connected to it. Next, the V2 radios require that the computer be set to a unique static IP address. Now, the Comm App will execute a script prior to launching the V2 Radio MDTS application, and this script will automatically configure the local Ethernet port on the computer to the required IP address. Now, after the Radio MDTS application launches, make sure to use a crossover Ethernet cable to connect the computer to the radio. The last thing to mention here is once you're done using the Radio MDTS application for the version 2 radios, make sure to select the Enable Dhcp button that will be displayed. Now this will launch a second script that will automatically configure the local Ethernet port on the computer to Dhcp. Now this is required to use that Ethernet port to connect to the FAA network and to use it to connect to the internet. Here's the Dhcp Enable button I was just talking about. Now we'll launch the application using the launch button as shown here. Here's the script that I was referring to, and this is configuring the Ethernet port on the computer as needed. Once the application launches, make sure to connect the Ethernet crossover cable to the radio, and the software will automatically query the radio until a connection is established as shown here with the green LED. Now all the available options will no longer be grayed out, and we can begin to query and make changes as needed. The first parameter we're going to look at is the current operating frequency. Now this will show the current frequency of the radio, and it will show the current high and lower operating frequency limits as shown. Now there will be options like this control knob to make changes to the operating frequency. You can also make changes by clicking on the up and down buttons, and you can actually hit the apply change button once the frequency of interest is shown to make the change to the radio, and as you see here, that updated. The oscillator frequency reference shows the current step level, and it shows you options again to make changes to this setting. Once you have the correct setting displayed, you can hit the apply change button, and that will send the changes to the radio and requery the setting as shown here, and it shows the correct setting that we just sent. You can actually key the radio using the test PTT option here. We'll hit the apply change to key the radio. And as you see here, it says test MDT, which means we're keying the radio through the MDT application. We can unkey it as well by toggling to the off position and hitting the apply change button as shown here. The Atr Switch parameter allows you to change the position of the Atr switch. Here's the settings that you can change it to. And then if you needed to make a change, hit the apply change button, and that will change the position of the Atr in accordance with the setting that was applied. The modulation depth parameter, similar to as before. Audio input parameter for the transmitter, you can toggle between VoIP or analog. In the FAA, for right now, we're always going to use analog. Once you make the selection, hit the apply change, and the change updates on the radio. Power attenuator, this is the settings that you can change for adjusting the power level on the radio, and it'll also query whether the transmitter is high power or low power. The Ptt Timeout and threshold parameters are two individual parameters that can be changed independently, and they both have their own unique apply change button. So make the changes and then hit the apply change button as desired. Now the Ptt threshold only applies to voltage keying. The low high power tunable frequency parameter only applies to VHF transmitters, so this selections will be grayed out if it was a UHF transmitter. And you can limit the higher and the lower limits for the operating frequency that the radio can be tuned to. Software and firmware versions, the one of interest here is probably the firmware version for you guys, but it has all the different software versions that are loaded on the radio. You can also query the serial number of the radio through the software. You can get the in-service time and the lapse time of the transmitters. You can also get the critical radio parameters by hitting the retrieve summary, and you can review those summaries in the window shown here. This is more of a troubleshooting tool more than anything else. You can also initiate C-bit tests. We'll initiate it here and review the results on this window, and this will give you a summary of all the results after the bit test was initiated. Again, more of a troubleshooting tool. The radio config summary option allows you to retrieve a summary of the current configuration of the radio. This is every parameter that you can query from the radio, and you can review those on a single screen as shown here, as opposed to individually querying them from the parameter selection. You can also retrieve the event log. We're going to do that here by selecting and releasing the button, and it'll query all the event logs that are saved currently on the radio. Again, this is more of a troubleshooting tool if you need to figure out what's been going on with a alarm, an alert, or if the radio is just acting up. You can retrieve the event log and look at some of the logs that have been saved on the radio. Again, more of a troubleshooting tool. The last change we made here shows we changed the PTT threshold. Reset option allows you to perform warm resets and factory resets to the radio. Now, make sure that you know the difference between both warm reset and factory reset by reading the notes that I'm showing here. I'm going to perform a warm reset. Now, you have to confirm that that's actually what you want to do. If you cancel out, it won't perform the reset. It'll just cancel out. But if you hit OK as shown here, the radio will go through a reset process, and then the radio will come back and confirm whether the reset was performed or whether it was not. After a response from the radio is received, it's always a good idea to verify the connection to the radio since it went through a reboot. And as shown here, we're still green, so we're still connected to the radio after it came back up. Now we're going to perform a factory reset, and we want to confirm that that's what we want to do. If we cancel out under confirmation, it won't do the reset. But if we hit OK, then the radio will go to a factory reset. Again, it's going to reboot. You'll see the LEDs on the front panel of the radio light up. And after the radio comes back and says, I've verified the factory reset, verify your connection status. As shown here, the radio is still going through the boot up process, and it was momentarily a connection error, but now the software was able to requery the radio and establish a communication session with the radio. The default option allows you to upload any required default settings to the radio per the latest notice of the V2 radios. Now, instead of going through the notice and figuring out all the settings and individually applying them, you can hit the apply all settings as shown here. And if you cancel, it won't upload all the settings, it'll just cancel out. But if you hit the OK button, it'll automatically upload all those required settings per the latest notice to the radio through a single upload. The radio configuration option, as shown here, allows you to query and download from the radio all the parameters that are associated with the transmitter's performance, like frequency, power levels, modulation levels, and all of the required settings per the latest notice of the V2 radios. Now you can review all those parameters here, and you can actually save the configuration we just downloaded from this transmitter by going to page 2 or tab 2, viewing the save options, enter a file name that you'd like to save this configuration to the laptop. Now I'm going to put testing demo here, and then I'm going to hit the save button here on step 2, and then under step 3 we're going to review all the settings that were saved and written to this configuration file on the computer. Now I want to warn not to use special characters as part of the file name. Just stick to numbers and text as in letters. If you put any special characters, when you hit save, nothing will be written to a log file on the computer, and this screen will be blank. And so we want to make sure that we remove any special characters from the name of the file so that we can actually save the file successfully. I'm going to give it a different name here. I'm going to put testing demo again, hit save, and now we see that the settings saved and were written to a file successfully as shown in this window. I'm going to close this save option, and there's another option that allows you to open an existing configuration file on the computer and upload it to the radio. To view the available configuration files that are currently saved on the computer, we want to go to step 1 and click on the folder icon shown here. Once we click on the folder icon, all the available configuration files will display. Here's the ones that we just created, and there's some default ones that were created by OKCET and can be used to be uploaded to a radio that's currently being tuned. And so we'll select the file, we'll go to step 2, open the file. review the parameters that include all of the required settings per the latest notice, and you notice that it was created for an operating frequency in the middle of the band. We're going to go to step 4 and upload the configuration to the radio. Once the upload finishes, all the new settings will be uploaded to the radio. And again, this is probably not the correct operating frequency for you, but we can change that in here in a little bit. So we're going to re-query the settings of the radio since we just recently uploaded new configuration to it. And once it retrieves, you see that all the new settings and the new operating frequency was loaded to the radio. Now the last thing you want to do here is change the operating frequency, since this is probably not your correct operating frequency. So just assign the correct frequency. I'm going to enter it here manually, hit the apply change button, and now the new frequency is set on the radio. Now this newly tuned radio is ready to be evaluated as far as performance, and all the settings have already been applied in accordance with the latest notice. Now this command prompt option is the last option I'll go over. This is more of a troubleshooting tool that if you have a failed radio or trouble radio, you may be able to send some special commands to the radio through second level engineering support and maybe figure out what's going on with this troubled radio. Again, more of a troubleshooting tool, and we can use in the future to troubleshoot radios. And that's pretty much it for this demo. We're going to go ahead and close the application using the X here. And one thing to remember, after you're done using the application, make sure to enable DHCP. And you do that by clicking on this button, DHCP enable button. A script will launch that will reconfigure your Ethernet port on the laptop to allow communication through the FAA network and to be used to connect to the internet. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to call us.